Okay, so on the eve of the American election, and by the time you're listening to this or watching this, it's already probably been announced. But I just thought I'd do a little recap on the America trip that I organised April 2024. It was flying in with a group into Las Vegas, renting bikes out of Vegas, and then doing a circular route round what I think is some of the best riding in the US through Utah, Colorado, Nevada, Arizona. So taking in Monument Valley, Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce, the oldest part of Route 66, or the longest uninterrupted part of Route 66. So yeah, I just wanted to do a little recap. I have got another tour going in 2025, so I suppose there's a little bit of a plug for that. But I'm also of the opinion that it's an easy place to tour America and to get yourself there and to get a bike. So this video should hopefully just give you a little bit of insight or options to think about if you are wanting to do America. Because, for me, politics aside, and sometimes the image of America can get ruined by the politics of America. We can almost think that the country is politics. And it's nothing like that when you're there. I've always found the people incredibly hospitable and welcoming and curious about what you're up to. The landscape is obviously tremendous and stunning, and it varies from state to state and from region to region. And I just think that the wide open expanse of America and being out there on two wheels is just the best place to be. I've done it. I've done coast to coast 3 times. I think I've ridden America 4 times, and every time I just love it as a place to roam. It's very easy to travel, lots of motels, lots of interesting places to stop and get food or drink or tourist attractions. Whether it's Seligman with Route 66 or Area 51 or any of those sort of weird and quirky places that you're going to come across, the old ghost towns. And then if you drop into Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, go along that southern state, that's another absolutely fascinating part of the world to travel on two wheels. The first time I went across America actually was with Trek America in the back of a big camper van. So that was just after I did Camp America. So that was an interesting experience. That was on 4 wheels just as a passenger. But the first time I did it on 2 wheels was on a Honda CT 110 back in 2010, that was 2011. I flew the bike into New York and then did a 6-week coast to coast to San Francisco, up to Seattle, then eventually on up to Alaska. So that was a real good insight into back roads America, staying away from the interstate, but just really enjoying the tracks that crisscrossed the states and then bumping into people and just seeing it from the seat of a small motorcycle. I did almost a coast to coast a few years later with my wife. We got married in Vegas, and I did a honeymoon tour, flying a GS12 into Las Vegas and then riding it out to New York and boating it back. And then just before COVID 2020 or 2019 even, I guided a tour. We were shipping bikes into New York, riding across over 4 weeks, and then back out of LA. So that was another sort of backcountry, non-interstate adventure, again through these western states, which everyone enjoyed seeing. And after COVID, the price of shipping just went through the roof, and it was no longer cost effective to ship bikes in unless you were going for more than 4 or 5 weeks. To give an example, to ship the GS in 2015 was about £1,800 return, flying in and boating back, and then after COVID it was about £5,000. It has dropped to £3,000, but then I think there's more regulation now. You do need a fixer at the American end, or it's certainly advised. So that's added $500 on. Then the insurance has got up, so you're now looking at £4,500 for a return air freight and boating back into America. So the sums just don't add up at the minute, which is why for 2024 I decided to go down the rental route. I thought that gave a little bit more flexibility. It allowed for a shorter duration tour, and just made it more cost effective. I mean, obviously doing an American trip is never cheap because rental's expensive, shipping a bike is expensive. You could buy a bike out there and sell it, but unless you're going out for a long time and you can deal with the buying and the selling at either end, I wouldn't advise that. I did have somebody buy a bike on the 2019 trip. They weren't happy with the bike they shipped in, so they bought a bike, a V-Strom 650, and it caused all sorts of headaches getting it out of America and selling it, and it seemed more hassle than it's certainly worth. So on this trip, we rented out of Las Vegas with Eagle Rider. They were doing a deal on the BMW R18, so we all, or most of us, had one of those, which was an interesting experience, and I'll talk about that bike in a short while for anybody who's interested in an R18. But the process of dealing with Eagle Rider and as a group is fairly convenient. It's easy to see what prices are what, which cities have got which bikes, and I think they all operate as subsidiaries. So each department, each branch has got different bikes, different costs. So it's more of a franchise model, which means it does take a bit of research to offer to see which bikes or which places have got which bikes. I chose Las Vegas, because obviously it's a good gateway to those incredible riding areas. And I've always said, if you've only got 2 weeks to ride America, then head to the west and do those four corner areas of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and Nevada. That to me is where the best riding is, the best scenery, the best atmosphere, the best romance of riding America. So that's where I'd head to. The other benefit of Las Vegas is it's actually quite a small city by comparison to, say, New York or LA or San Francisco, and it's very easy to get in and out of it. So if you're arriving a little bit jet lagged or a little bit nervous, then the beauty of Las Vegas, it's very easy to get out into the desert. And actually, the location of the branch that we used with Eagle Rider meant that you got a turn onto the road running outside the rental place, right to the end of that, turn right onto the sort of main road out of Las Vegas, which wasn't an interstate, so you didn't even have to deal with the interstate, and you were straight out towards Death Valley. So to take a group, coordinating a group and coordinating nervous riders or new to the environment riders, it's just a perfect place to start a motorcycle adventure. Starting in Chicago, which I have done. I've ridden Chicago down Route 66 on the postie bike. Getting out of Chicago is a hassle. Getting in and out of LA is a hassle. New York's a hassle. Whereas Vegas, so easy, and they've actually got a good selection of bikes. Pascal, who runs the place there, is a good guy. He's a proper biker, and he was very helpful with this ride that we did out of there. It's quite easy to devise a route in America. Well, actually, it's not, because there's so many places you want to go. It's very hard to get a route that takes it all in. For me, the route was intended just to take in the iconic places such as Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, Zion, Bryce. And then we went out to Durango, rode the $1 Million Highway, took in Lake Powell, did the oldest stretch of, or the longest uninterrupted stretch of Route 66 between Seligman and Kingman. And we unfortunately missed out Moab, but we went down through Shiprock, down to Winslow, Arizona, famous for the Eagles song. And that's all doable with manageable days. Typically I don't like to ride more than 200 miles a day. And in America, that's plenty to get you through interesting landscape and from one interesting destination to the next. I don't think you need to do more than 200 miles. And actually, I think doing more than 200 miles means you're going to hit the interstate. And you're going to have to sort of whistle past a few interesting places. And I don't think that's the point of America. I think doing long stretches on the slab kind of misses what's really of interest. Yes, sometimes it is useful to do a bit of interstate, maybe coming back into Las Vegas if you're coming down from Zion, for example, or coming back up from Kingman. But the rest of the time, I think it's best avoided. And the beauty of this Four Corners area is that there is barely any interstate anyway. So you can do this entire area just riding nice two-lane stretches of road, which you've got plenty of corners and lots of changing terrain and topography and geology, all that sort of stuff. So that's why I'd choose that. Just a note on Las Vegas: if you are going to fly in and out of Las Vegas, avoid the weekends, because the cost of hotels is about 3 times what it is midweek. So that's a little bit of a thing. Which bike to choose? We took the R18s, but you could have done it on any bike. We did have one guy on a Yamaha Bolt 950. And other than comfort and lack of luggage space, we took a support van. That bike did that job well. Also, Luke, he had an XSR 900, so it's more of a sporty bike. And that bike did the job as well. So I don't think you've got to go and get a big Harley Davidson or a big cruiser, because the smaller bikes do work well equally and are a little bit cheaper. For accommodation, lots of options. Obviously, Booking.com is really good to get some accommodation options, or you could make it up as you go along. Obviously with a small group, 1 or 2 of you or 4 of you, you could pick up motels as you went along. Obviously, with a bigger group, I like to have everything booked in place. So Booking.com makes life incredibly easy. Prices have gone up in the last few years, certainly post-COVID. The $40 motel still does exist, but not with the same frequency as it used to. And so hotel prices, I found it typically on par with Europe. If you head to places like Zion National Park or Bryce, Grand Canyon, you're going to be looking at anything from 100 to 250 for a room per night. So it can get a little bit, well, it's certainly more expensive than it used to be. Food's more expensive, so it's not quite the cheap destination it used to be. But if you think on par with European prices, I don't think you'll go too far wrong with that. In terms of, and I've said about routing, in terms of routing, you know what, it's very difficult unless you've been there to pick a prescribed route through research and stick to it and not feel like you've missed things that you could have added in. And that's why I always think if you can do it with fluidity and book as you go along and make changes to the route as you go along, I think that's sometimes the best way, because there will always be that person who says, oh, well, why don't you go up via, you know, that Gooseneck Canyon, for example, which you might not have known about, but missing out on it would be a great sorrow to the trip. So I think you've got to allow some flexibility. And as I say, with the ease of traveling in America, flexibility is an easy thing to factor in. What we did on the coast to coast, when there was a group of 13 of us going 4 weeks from New York to LA, is that I put in sort of a weekly destination. So at the end of each week, I got a fixed location which I wanted to hit, but that allowed for six days of variance as to where we did stay, and that worked really well actually. So the weekly accommodation that was booked gave structure to the trip and gave it a pace that allowed it to be manageable. And that kept us dragged along, sort of thing, kept us aiming towards something, but it allowed us to sort of be flexible with the days in between. And some days people will go off in different directions and stay in different places, and then reconvene further down the track. So that was a nice way of doing it, which allowed for some predictability and stability of the trip, but also enough flexibility to make it an adventure, to make it like excitingly different every day, because you weren't exactly sure where you were going to stay. And certainly through the guts of America, through the centre, there is plenty of motels to just rock up at an evening. Busier tourist places in the West, I think you do need to book in advance. Or go camping. You know, take a tent. There's always campsites, certainly in the western parts, certainly in the national forests and the national parks, which you'll need a pass, which is about $80 for the year, which is well worth getting because you're going to be going to a lot of national parks on the way. In terms of safety, I mean, I find riding in America is very safe. I've never had any issue. I find driving is generally very courteous and gentle paced. It doesn't seem as rushed or as hurried as other places. Obviously, cities are different to rural areas, but the roads out in these four corner areas are generally very quiet. I guess the biggest risk is other tourists. You know, as it always is, people jumping in rental cars with an unfamiliarity of the road situations and excited to be where they are. They don't always pay the most attention, just so doing U-turns or pulling out on the wrong sides of the road, all that sort of thing. Oh, that's my alarm. Or pulling out on the wrong side of the roads, that sort of thing can always happen. And so you do have to have your wits about you. But I don't think it's any worse than anywhere else. Road conditions are also generally good. Road surfaces are pretty good. The riding season's quite wide, certainly in this Four Corners area, from April through till, I guess, October, November time. Gets a bit cold then, but all the way through there. Probably avoid August, July, August. If you're going through Death Valley, it can get a little bit warm there, sort of 40, 50 degrees. I think a highest I've been through is 49, which is pretty warm, manageable, but it is pretty warm. And that's it, really. I mean, yeah, America, as I say, it's always been. It was high on the list of places for people to go. I think 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I think its appeal has faded. As I say, it's been dominated by politics, and I think that's ruined its image a little bit as a tourist destination. We think of it more for the politicians rather than the places, and yeah, it is a great shame because for me, roaming through America, you know, that landscape, that red rock landscape that goes on as far as the eye can see, and you ride along through a big long. It could be a big long stretch of road. It doesn't have to have corners in it to be interested in America. You're the only person on that road. You got the sun coming down, a nice blue sky. There's no place like it, really. Is it as adventurous as other places? Well, no, but that's not. Sometimes you just want a nice riding holiday, which is exciting, but also largely safe. And I think the language barrier just benefits you so greatly. The recent trip to Spain, fantastic riding, almost on par with America, but you can't speak the language, and that really inhibits your ability to connect with the culture of the people and to hear their stories and to share your stories and to have those moments that really bring a depth to a trip. And so for me, America is just incredible. New Mexico as well, all that region through there. Yeah. I mean, I can see why the Americans don't have passports, because the nation as a place to ride and to travel is just incredible. And as I say, people-wise, I've never had any issue with people. Only great stories or great memories of people that have always helped. They're always very helpful. If you need help, generally, to a man, they're very helpful. In terms of the BMW R18s that we rode on the trip in April, like we got them because we got them cheap. It allowed me to keep the price cheap. An interesting machine, really was an interesting machine. Not a good machine. I actually did a video called it terrible in the first day of riding it, and I think pretty much most of us on those bikes we would stick with that concluding remark that it's a terrible bike. It's terrible because the expectation of it. BMW went to great efforts in building this engine and putting it in this classic and good-looking motorcycle chassis and selling it. In the case that I was on the Transcontinental, selling it for £30,000, which gives great expectation of the machine that you're going to ride, but it was completely underwhelming and subpar in most areas, I thought. I mean, the engine itself was fine, but to say it dominates the architecture of the bike and it forces your feet closer to your body and doesn't allow the cruiser stance, it hasn't got the guts, it hasn't got the power or the refinement to justify that domination of the machine. And yeah, it almost felt quite flat. It had a really poor bottom end. It was quite tall gear, so it was actually difficult getting it away. Which would think it gave you great legs at the top end, but it didn't really give that either. It didn't have a lot of roll-on mid-range power. It didn't like to be revved. It didn't like to be lugged. It didn't like anything really. It was a funny engine. It got sort of that boxer twin sort of trait of that pick up and go sensation, but it never really went much beyond that pickup. So I thought the engine was very lackluster, and then the chassis and the suspension really let it down. Doing the washboard type tarmac that is across some parts of America. Some of the roads there's a lot of seams between the cracks in the roads that have been, I guess, tarred over. But it did meant that every time you hit one, it jarred the bike, it unsettled the bike. There was no suppleness, no refinement to the ride quality. It just never was. It never felt happy, and therefore it never felt stable. It never felt entirely connected to the road. It just wasn't sophisticated, and I kind of wonder what the BMW were thinking. With bikes like the Goldwing, you can see how they're taking on Harley Davidson by offering a really, technologically advanced machine, air suspension, and a great high performance engine. I guess Moto Guzzi with the California, they've got that sort of age-old nostalgia and classic look about it. There's an authenticity about the California, but the R18, it seemed like it had been designed in a boardroom by people who thought they were cool, but who weren't really that cool, who probably didn't understand the folklore and mythology of the American West or the interior of America, which really does embrace everything that the Harley Davidson brand does encapsulate. And I don't think they really understood that, to separate it out in politics. I think they built it for the Democratic coastal regions, but not the Republicans on the interior. And I think it's the Republicans in the interior who buy the bike and luster after such machinery. And I don't think the R18 connects with that type of person, and it's that type of person who buys the bike. And I think riding through America on the R18s, I think people were a bit perplexed as to why you weren't on a Harley. And actually, one of the R18s broke down, and the replacement bike was a Harley. And Steve, who was on that bike, he was far happier on a Harley. It got more character, more charisma. It fitted in with the mythology of America and the landscape of America. So for BMW to build a bike that actually didn't connect with the area in which it was designed to compete, that's where it missed its mark for me. It just ideologically didn't mix with its, I guess, its target audience really. And I think they should have either gone really high tech with it, some really good air suspension take on the Goldwing, or not bothered at all really. It just wasn't a good. I don't think it's not a bad bike. There are ways in which you could defend and like that bike. I totally understand why people do like that bike, and I know somebody who likes it very much, and they don't understand why I think it's terrible. But I just think they didn't go far enough. They weren't brave enough. They weren't innovative enough, and it wasn't an engineering solution or offering. It was a marketing-driven offering. They thought they could be cool, hip, and capture a market that I don't think really wanted it. And that's why prices are terrible, resale values are terrible, and the bike just wasn't good enough. So yeah, it was a shame. But you know what? Across America, any bike will be perfect, because just being on two wheels across America in America I still think is the best place to be on a motorcycle. So hopefully that's of some use. As I say, renting a bike for me at the minute is the best option. Now there are other options called Rider Share, and there is a Twisted Road, where it's a bit like Airbnb. People put up their bikes for rent, and the software connects you with Joe Blogs in Las Vegas who's got a Tenere A700 to rent or whatever, and you book it through like a booking doc, like an Airbnb type process. I did look into this. Obviously, with a group, it gets problematic because the bikes are going to be spread out all over a diverse geographical region, so it's not easy to coordinate. But also the price, it's a bit like Airbnb. It shows a price, but when you click through and add the insurance and all the other fees, it was actually comparable to Eagle Rider. And I just thought, for convenience and clarity, going through a big company was easier than dealing with somebody direct. That's not to poo-poo the idea of going through somewhere like Riders Share, but it didn't work for me as a group, and I was a bit disappointed with the pricing of it. It really did get inflated as you went through the process. The front end price was appealing, but the back end price was less so. As I say, buying a bike, if you've got a friend out there who can buy a bike and sell a bike for you at the end, that's another option, because they can also put you on their insurance. You can get a policy through Progressive as well, but there is a little bit of a grey area because you're a non-US resident. So you might not want to go through that. You might want the ease of dealing with someone like Eagle Rider. There are other companies out there. Hertz also do bike rental, and then there's smaller operations. There's operations in Colorado who do trail bikes. That's of interest. You might want to look into that if you want to do some of the dirt roads through Colorado, of which there are many. I'd looked into that trip myself, but none of the places seem to have a big enough fleet of bikes, so it wouldn't have worked from a commercial basis. So for 2025, I'm just doing another Cowboy Ride, for the reason being that I still think it's the best area to ride. I always said, if you've only got a 2-week window to ride America, just head to the Four Corners region, get a bike, ride around, just get lost out there, because you'll never be disappointed in what that region of America has got to offer. So yeah, irrespective of who wins the election, America will still stand. The people will still remain incredibly accommodating and welcoming and friendly. And so ignore the politics, just go to the place and enjoy it for what it is. And that's an incredible place to ride a motorcycle. So yeah, maybe see you out there. Cheers, bye.